Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on using the new Blender 5.0 to do basic video editing. In this session, what we're going to do is take a vertical video like this and turn it into a regular landscape video with the original video in the center and then a zoomed up version of that in the background, plus a little border just for kicks. Topics of this tutorial include, but are not limited to, importing the video file, doing cuts on it, shifting pieces around, adding a crossfade transition, a blur effect, a nice little border, and of course, taking all of those results and dumping it out to a final video file that you can then share with your friends or post to YouTube or what have you. Assuming you like what you see, at the end of all of that, we'll have a bonus section with some extra tips and tricks for you. A few notes before we get started. This tutorial is geared towards beginners, so if you have previous editing experience or Blender experience, you're going to probably find this a bit slow. I have chapter points set up throughout the video, so you can skip ahead to material that you're interested in. Second is I'm using an older computer today, which is pretty much the same one I always use. It's kind of slow, so Blender may look slow because I'm on a slower computer. It doesn't mean that when you use Blender yourself that you'll have similar results in terms of how it performs. That also means that I have a smaller resolution. It's only 1280 by 720, which will mean that the user interface in Blender will look a little bit crammed. Assuming you're working off of a higher resolution display, like at least the standard 1080p, then you shouldn't have a problem. Things will look a lot nicer on your display. The last thing I want to say is that in Blender there are many ways of doing things. In this tutorial I'll show you probably 1, 2, maybe 3 ways of doing the same thing, just to show you the variety or options that you have. Knowing keyboard shortcuts is incredibly important in Blender. It'll save you a lot of time, so I will show you those as we go through the video. It's good to memorize the ones that you'll use most often because otherwise you'll be going into the menus all the time and that'll just slow you down. Okay, so with all that said, let's get started by getting Blender. So the first step is to go to blender.org and you'll come to a page like this where you can go ahead and hit the download button to download Blender. It should automatically detect what operating system you're using and then give you that appropriate option. So for me, it knows I'm on Linux, and if I click this, it'll start downloading the tarball. If instead you're on Windows or Mac, it should give you the appropriate option. When it comes to installing then, for Windows, you'll need to click to open that MSI file and go through the regular install procedures, after which Blender will be available within your start menu. For Linux, it's a little bit different. The tarball, you just unpack it, and then you can run Blender by clicking on the Blender file within a file browser or running Blender inside of a command line. So here we can see this is actually the first day that Blender is available, and it is taking a while to get. So you can see here I've already grabbed it just in case it would take a long time again. So let's go ahead and go to my already downloaded version so I can show you how you can do this inside of Linux. So I'm going to go into my terminal. As I said, it's already downloaded, so the command I'll use to unpack it is tar xvf blender and 5, and I'll press tab to autocomplete. So this is basically the unpacking process. Once this completes, I can go into the Blender folder and start Blender. We skipped ahead a bit. Let's go into the Blender folder now, 5.0, and we can start Blender like this, /blender. And here we are in the new Blender 5.0. This is what you'll see whether you're on Linux, Mac, or Windows. Assuming this is the first time you've opened up Blender 5.0.0, then you will see this menu here, which is asking us to provide our preferences. Now, what I would suggest is you keep most of these options the same, except for mouse select. For me, I've been using Blender for more than 5 years now, just for video editing. And back then, it was always right mouse to select things inside of the video sequence editor. So I'm going to pick that. You can go ahead and choose left if you wish, but I'm going to go with the right. And when I mention things inside of Blender in terms of what I'm doing, if I say I'm clicking on something to select, that means I am using my right mouse button. If you are going to use your left, if you're choosing left, then you go ahead and click on your left mouse button. All right, so we're going to click Save New Preferences. And then that screen goes away, and we are left now with the regular splash screen that you'll get every time you start up Blender. On the left-hand side here, you can see this is what you want to do for starting up a new project. We want to do video editing, so we will click Video Editing. And here we get our video editing workspace. There's a lot going on here, and we'll get through quite a bit of it by the end of the tutorial. One thing that you won't see is this little thing here. This is something that I've added just to help with understanding what I'm doing. So if I left click, you'll see that I'm doing a left click there and it's showing up. If I do a right click, it'll show the right click or a middle mouse button. This is just to help you out to see what I'm doing in addition to whatever I'm telling you that I'm doing. Alright, so the first step of every project will be to bring in your content. We can do that by going into the file browser area over here. It works just like a regular file browser, so I'm going to browse for my files. I know I have it all the way within folder over here, my RAM disk folder, so I'll double click to get in. And this is the file that I'm going to bring in. One nice thing about Blender, when you hover over an item, then it'll give you some metadata about that, like how many frames it is, the frame rate, the resolution. Anyway, so to bring a file into Blender, just left click and then drag it over into this section here. This is the preview. So I'm just going to drop it right in here. And as soon as I do that, you'll see it's displaying some messages at the bottom. One is about how the scene frame rate has changed, because as you bring content in for the first time, it'll automatically update the frame rate that you're using for your Blender project. The other thing it's doing is it's building a proxy. So while that's going on, I can explain very quickly. In Blender, proxies are basically stand-ins for your actual video, because videos can be quite large in size and quite cumbersome to go through. So it creates a smaller version of that video that is easier for it to show in the preview area and for you to work with. Things are just faster when you use proxies. Okay, and that's done. Okay, so the proxy is done. What do we see here? So as I mentioned before, what we have here in this section, this is the preview. This is where you get to see what's going on within your Blender project at the current frame that you're at. And what frame are you at? Well, right here, this blue line plus this header up here, this is our playhead, which shows us where we are inside of the timeline. This is the sequencer over here, this big bottom section. Most of our work will be in here. And you can see that we have these two bars here that got added when we brought in our movie file. The top blue bar, it represents the video component of the movie that we imported, and the green bar at the bottom represents the audio. One thing you may not see, depending on what your resolution is, you may not see all these little bits here that run all the way along. These are the different thumbnails that Blender has created for us as a helpful reference, but for me, I actually don't like seeing those. I'd rather just scrub through the video by, for me, using my left mouse button, scrubbing through and then looking inside of the preview to be able to see what's going on. So I typically turn this off, and I'll show you how to do that now. The other reason is because I think it takes up a little bit more resources, and I'm pretty short on resources with this computer. So to turn off the thumbnails, you can go over here, this little arrow right next to this icon here that says Show Overlays. You click on that, and then it pops up this menu. You can click on thumbnails, and that hides that piece. You can also hide other things here too if you don't want to see them, but I like being able to see all this information. For example, if we look at each of these, actually the information you see is the same because they're coming from the same original source file. So this section over here, this is the name that Blender has given to this content, which is based off of the file name. This section in the center is the source location, the path to that file sitting on my computer. And finally, this last number here, 466, that represents the duration of the content. It is 466 frames long. Now, what is a frame? Well, each one of these positions inside of our timeline is a frame. So as I scrub through, I'm going through the frames, and you can see where we are also as a number over here. We're on frame 51 right now, and as I keep going, you can see that it increases. I can instead also use the arrow keys to go back and forth. So left arrow to go back, or right arrow to go forwards, frame by frame. So using your mouse or using the arrow keys, these are different ways you can scrub through your footage. One last thing before we move on, I should point out that there's actually a name for these things. The official name inside of Blender is called a strip. So whether you're working with the video portion of your movie file or the audio portion or some other things like the crossfade effect that we're going to add later or the blur effect, those are also going to be strips. And as you add more things or cut and move things around, you'll have all sorts of strips inside of your sequencer that you can manipulate as you please. All right, so I explained the strips. Before we do anything else, let me take some time to talk about the preview, because we see a few things here. First, we see our video content right in the center. This is the same video that I was showing at the start. Very obvious, no problem. But what about this part over here? This checkerboard pattern that exists on the left and right sides. This checkerboard pattern represents the lack of content inside of our Blender project. Because right now our Blender project is set up as a regular landscape 16 by 9 output, and we gave it this vertical video. So we have something in the center, we've got nothing on the sides, and having a checkerboard pattern here visible is Blender's way of telling us that there is nothing there right now. If we were to export this movie right now, we would get a 16 by 9 landscape video with just our vertical video in the center and black bars on the sides. Okay, so that's what that means. And it's not a problem because we're going to fill it in with a zoomed in version of this video later. Now, what about the black bars that are on the sides of the checkerboard? The black bars here is just empty space because Blender is trying to show us the preview of what we're working on, and the area that it's in isn't sized exactly the same. We can actually resize this if we want to. So I can hover over anywhere along this line, and then with my left mouse button, just click and drag, and you'll see that it'll automatically fill in that gap as we need to. I'm going to bring it back about over here, just so we have a reasonable amount of space to work with. Okay, so that's the preview area. Now the next thing to talk about while we're still looking at the preview is the preview of the video, because this looks very overexposed compared to the original video that I had shown you at the start of this tutorial. There appears to be a problem with Blender 5.0 where when you import a video, it may look overexposed like this, and it has to do with color space. I don't know enough about color space to explain color space to you, but I can tell you how you can fix this. Over here, in the top right section under this Properties editor, with this tab specifically, Strip, which it should already be set to Strip, you can click on it if it's not. We'll scroll down until we see the section labeled Source. There it is. Okay, and you know what? Let me click and expand this out, because I want to be able to show you the labels here. Here under color space, right now it's showing this string here. We can click on here and change this to sRGB. By doing that, Now you look in the preview and you can see, well, okay, now it looks better. It doesn't look overexposed. You can see the things in the background and all is well. Okay, so that is a fix you can apply if you are seeing that as you import your own videos into Blender. Now, before we get into actual editing, let's talk a little bit about how you can move around inside of the Blender interface. If we go back over here and I hover over this video file again that we had imported, you can see that it shows that we have 15.5333 seconds worth of content here. And when I go over to the sequencer, looking at the top, you can see we've got, it starts at 0, we've got 1 second, 2, 3, 4, it goes up to 5 seconds. So there ought to be more, and there is. What we can do inside most of these areas around here, when you want to zoom in or out to see more content, is use your mouse wheel. So if I use my mouse wheel and just start wheeling through, you can see I can zoom out and then I can see, okay, we can go past the 8-second mark and actually it looks like there's still more content because, as I said, it's up to 15. Keep going and there we go. So 15 seconds worth. It did import all of it. That was a lot of mouse wheel action though. An easier way to zoom out to be able to see all of your content is pressing the home key on your keyboard. So when I do that, there you go. It has zoomed to fit exactly the content that we have. There are other options too, like if I hold down on the control key and then use the mouse wheel, you can see that instead of zooming when I go one way or the other, it's actually panning across the timeline. So that's one good thing to know. If I instead hold down on the shift key and again use the mouse wheel, now it's going up and down instead of left and right in a panning motion. Now is probably a good time to explain about channels. If you have used a graphics program before, like Photoshop or GIMP, then you already understand the idea about layers. This is like layers, where things on higher layers or higher channels will be shown on top of things that are on lower channels. So same concept applies here, and we're going to take advantage of that as we go through this tutorial and add more components to our project. We can easily move any of these strips of ours to other channels if we wish to. Right now there's no reason to, but we can and we will do that later on, you'll see. To finish up with this talk about navigating, one final thing I should tell you about is the middle mouse button. If you click and hold down on your middle mouse button, then you can pan in any direction at all. So it's also a very handy thing to know. So there's the mouse wheel with control or shift, and then middle mouse button to pan around, and the home key to zoom. Alright, so before we actually do any cutting, let's see what it's like to play this thing back, because there is a play button right here, and we can also press the space bar to get it to play, and then it'll play in the preview. So let's do that just to see how that works. Okay, so I'm going to click this button. I'm going to turn that volume down a bit. So a few things to point out right here. First of all, you've noticed then it kind of does a loop. It doesn't play all the content. It gets to this solid black line here and then just goes right back to the start. That's one thing to notice. The other thing is that over here in the top left corner of the preview, we have the frame rate indicator. And I'm going to press space to stop that preview. When it's showing in red, it means that it cannot play fast enough in real time. So let's tackle these one by one. Let's start with this whole looping business. The reason it does that is because within our Blender project for this particular scene that we're working on, it has a very defined start and finish. And right now it is set to start right at the 0 second mark and then finish right around here at this black bar. And what that means is when we go to export our results to create that final video file, it's only going to export out this range of frames here. If we wanted to change that, it's very easy to do. We're not going to do that right now because we can make all of our edits and such and scrub to do previews without touching it. So we'll leave it for later because we are going to cut out some material and shrink the total amount of content that we have. So there's no point to change the scene frame ranges right now. Regarding the frame rate, well, one thing we can try, I mentioned before about the proxies. We can create different proxies for each of our videos. Right now, Blender is using the 100% sized proxy. So it's a copy of the original source file, but it's still at the full resolution of that video. What we can do is choose a different one, and hopefully that will play better, at least as we do our basic edits. So let's see how to do that right now. To change the proxies that we're using inside of our preview, we have to open up the sidebar of the preview. There's two ways of doing that. One is by pressing the letter N on your keyboard, like this. Then it pops out this section. Very easy to do. Another way, in case you don't want to, is you can try to find this little arrow here and then click on that and it'll do the same thing. Now, once the sidebar is opened up, we have to go over here and click on View. And then right here, Proxy Render Size. You can see it's at 100 right now. I'm going to set it to 25%. And by doing that, now Blender is creating another proxy. And once it's complete, it will switch over to that proxy. And hopefully, if we try to play the preview again, it'll play much nicer. I'm going to go ahead and click on the word View here, this View tab, just to make it go away. So we'll still have access to these, but they're not going to take up the full space of our preview. Okay, let's go ahead and try and play this again. I'll use the spacebar this time. Okay, this is playing back much nicer. It's most of the time showing 30 or close to 30, so much better than what it was before. Oh, it's starting to dip back down now. Okay, well, we had a few good seconds there. I'll go ahead and press space to stop. All right, so that is how we can change the proxies. One other thing I should mention is where the proxies are. They're certainly not in memory. When Blender creates a proxy, by default, it'll create it inside of the same folder that your video files are contained in. So if I go over here now and I scroll around, actually, maybe if I do a refresh, or if I back out and go back in, let's do that. Back out and go back in. There we go. So now we have this folder, BL Proxy, Blender Proxy. Every single folder that has video content that you've brought in, it'll have a BL Proxy folder as Blender creates the proxies. And within that, if I double click in there, it'll have one folder for every single video file that you've brought in. And then inside of that, it'll have a proxy video file for each of the different levels of proxies you've created. Okay, so just so you know, that's what these things are. So if you're wondering, as you're working with Blender, what the heck is this folder? It is where the proxies are stored. And you are free to delete them if you want. Blender will just recreate them as it needs them. All right, it's finally time to do some actual editing. What we're going to do is pretend like this is a normal kind of video where we've brought it in. It's the raw footage. There's probably stuff at the beginning and at the ends that we want to cut out. And then maybe there's pieces that we want to remove for a variety of reasons. So we will do that. We'll go through and make various cuts, and then we'll delete segments out and then shift everything around so it's all one continuous set of frames. To do cuts on your strips, first you make sure your strips are selected, and these strips, they're already selected. And then you position your playhead to wherever you want to make this cut. So let's say I don't want the first 1 second worth, so I'm going to place it around here. Now you go to the strip menu, and up at the top of this menu that pops up, you can say split. Now I want you to notice that many of these menu items here have values on the right hand side. These are the keyboard shortcuts that are currently defined for the action. So for splitting or cutting, the keyboard shortcut is K. Let's keep that in mind because we'll use that after this. We say split, and there we go. It has now done a split. Now we have a set of strips over here. This is the first second, and then we have the rest of the content. Now I'll jump ahead a few seconds, and this time I'll press the letter K, the keyboard shortcut, instead of going to that strip menu. And there you go. You can see it's much faster. It's much faster to do anything with keyboard shortcuts when you can. I'll go ahead and do another cut right over here. And notice that as I've been doing the cuts, each time Blender recognizes I'm trying to do a split, it'll split it at that point, and then it has been selecting the content to the right for me to continue doing actions on. The fact that it is selecting the content to the right of the playhead is because my mouse was actually on the right side of the playhead when I pressed the K key. This is the first time I'm going to tell you that it's very important where your mouse is as you're using keyboard shortcuts. So let me demonstrate by doing this a few more times. So I'm going to place it over here. I'll keep my mouse on the right side. I'll press K. There, did a cut. Now I'm going to press over here for the playhead. This time I'll put my mouse on the left-hand side and press K. There, see? Proven. So as you start doing your splits, your cuts, so please keep that in mind. It really makes a difference where your mouse is when you press keyboard shortcuts. I'll prove to you that this can be a problem if you're not thinking about it. I'm going to place our playhead right over here for the final cut, and I will keep the mouse over here and press the letter K, and nothing happens because of the fact that I don't actually have the strip selected now because Blender selected this strip instead of keeping me on this strip. So now I'm going to have to click to select this current strip that I'm at, and now I'll press the letter K and it will perform that last split for me. Before we finish off on this segment, I do want to point out that the video and audio portions of our content has been selected each and every time just by clicking on it or making the cuts. This is because right now these two things are connected. You can tell they're connected by looking at that little link icon around each of them. And it's very handy for when you want to do just straight cuts or moves or things, but it can get in the way of other operations. So later on, we'll see how we can disconnect them to be able to do any of our work. All right, so we've done our splits. We now have multiple segments here that we can work with. Let's go ahead and show how we can delete things that we don't want. When I started this, I was saying that we don't want what's at the front and end, so let's do that first. I'll click to select this. And to delete things, you can go again to the strip menu and say delete. The keyboard shortcut is X, so we'll do that for everything else. So I'll just click delete. There it is, it's gone. And now I'll just go ahead and start deleting other things until I only have 3 strips left, or 3 pairs of strips. So for these next few actions, I'll just click to select and then press X on my keyboard. Okay, now this one, X to delete, and now this one, X to delete. All right, so we are now left with our 3 remaining pieces. And that's it for this part. That's how you can delete strips from Blender. Quite easy. Just use the X key after you select what you want to get rid of. Now that we've done those deletions, we need to move things around because we have plenty of gaps. If I scrub through from here, you can see we have a blank and then content, blank, and then content, blank, and well, the scene stops there, but if it were to go all the way, we'd have more blanks and then final bit of content. Moving things is quite easy to do. One way to do it is with your mouse button, the one that you chose for selection. You just click and drag to then place the strip where you want it inside of the timeline. So let's start with this first one. We're going to shift it all the way over to the starting point of our scene. So I'll click to select and I'll keep holding on that and start moving. As I move it around, if you look, you can see there's numbers showing up on these two strips, and they indicate the start frame and then the end frame for where the strip is about to be placed. It'll be placed as soon as I let go. And you'll also notice that as I get close to the start, and then it kind of snaps into place. That's a nice feature that Blender has. You can override that if you want by holding down on some keyboard buttons. At the very bottom of the Blender window, you can see it's showing you different things that you can press on to change the behavior. So let's say we don't want this snapping. It's showing over here where I have it highlighted now. Control is to invert that whole snapping. So if I hold down on Control, now you can see it's allowing me to just position it exactly where I want it without snapping. If I let go of the control, then now it's back to snapping behavior. So looking at the bottom is a great thing to do as you're getting familiar with new sections of the Blender interface. It's very handy to see the different options you have available to you as you're taking certain actions. Anyway, I'll go ahead and finish this now by letting it snap to frame number 1 and then letting go of my mouse button. And there we go, it has been placed. So that's one way of moving strips around, just by literally click and drag to take it where you want it to go. For these last two strips, while I could do the same thing of clicking and dragging, I know that all I really want to do is just get rid of the gap in between these strips. And there is an easy way to do that. I'll show you that now. All you have to do is click to place the playhead somewhere before the strip that needs to move, and then just press the backspace key on your keyboard. By doing that, it has shifted everything over. All I did was take everything that was to the right of our playhead and bring it over as much as it could without overlapping anything. Let's go ahead and press that backspace key one more time, and that finishes the job. We have now shifted everything over. Now we know how we can move things around. If you do like using the mouse, then I'll show you one more way of doing that. So instead of clicking and then holding on to that select mouse button, you just click to select and release the mouse, and then you press the letter G on your keyboard. And then you can move it around without holding down on a mouse button. It feels a lot more comfortable doing it that way. I also didn't mention that you can move not just left and right across time, but also up and down to different channels if you want. You can do this with this method or with the click and drag. The other thing I didn't mention is what happens if you move your mouse and then place it, try to place it like this. What you can see happening on screen now is Blender is adding a red border around these strips. It's telling us that this is not actually allowed. So if I were to left click to confirm my selection right now, it'll just pop it back where it'll fit. It won't let me place these strips on top of the other strips. It doesn't work that way. One last thing I want to tell you about before we move on is the undo function. Just like most programs, you can undo an action by going to the Edit menu and choosing Undo. And of course, we also have Ctrl-Z as the normal shortcut. So let me go ahead, and over here I'll press Ctrl-Z as many times as I need so that we can see that it has moved or not. Because there's actually many levels of undo that it has. And there we go. I had to press it how many times now? And it undoed that last action of removing the gap. While it's in this current state with this gap in place, before I press the backspace to bring it back, I want to once again stress the importance of knowing where your mouse cursor is when you use keyboard shortcuts. We know if I press backspace that it'll close this gap, but that only works when I'm inside of this sequencer view. If I try to press the backspace key up here in the preview, nothing happens. Doesn't matter how many times I press it. Not going to work. The backspace key is specifically tied to the sequencer view here. So here it'll work, up there it doesn't. Okay, so that's one more reminder to you that it is important where your mouse is when you use keyboard shortcuts. Okay, moving on to transitions. What we're going to show you next is how to do a crossfade. If I scrub through my footage right now, it's looking okay. There's a bit of a jump right there, and then there's another jump right there. What we're going to do is add a crossfade between these two strips to smooth it out between these two. The way to create a crossfade is like so. First, you select the strip, the second strip that's going to appear. So I'll click to select that. Then we need to move it so that it's overlapping the first strip. So I'll press G on my keyboard, and then I'll move it up and over, and I'll just click to place it here. So now we have this strip that plays, right? And then we have this strip that also plays, and they share this segment of time right over here. The longer you have of an overlap, the longer the transition is going to be. Now, once we have these two things placed with some overlap between them, the next step is to have the correct kind of selection order to the strips and then add the transition. So to do that, I first have to select the first strip that appears by time. Then you hold down on the Shift key and click to select the next strip, right? So now we have both of these sets of strips selected. Now we go to the Add menu, and down here under Transition, we pick Crossfade. There. So now it has added a new strip right up here. And let's scrub through to see if it's doing it right. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So it did a nice fade from the first strip into the second strip. That's exactly what we wanted. And it's as easy as that. If for whatever reason it didn't do it properly, by which I mean somehow it's showing the second strip and then fades back to the first strip and then starts playing the second strip. It sounds weird, but it might happen. If it does happen, you can correct that by going back into your Properties editor within the Strip tab, and then scrolling up to the top and clicking this button here to flip the inputs around on the effect strip. Now all we need to do to finish the job here is close the gap here that we've created by shifting over that second set of strips. And again, we can do that just by pressing the backspace. So there you go. That's how you can easily add a crossfade transition to your Blender project. There is also the wipe, which is a fun one to use, and it has a bunch of options that you can access from up over here in the Properties editor if you were to try to add that in. Okay, so we're done with all of the edits that actually change the duration of our project. So now is a good time to change the scene frame range so that when we go and export, we're not going to have a bunch of content and then a bunch of nothing. We want to stop the scene right over about here at the last frame. One easy way of doing that is to select everything that we have, all of these strips, and then use a command from within the View menu. So to select all the strips, the easiest way to do it is to press the letter A on your keyboard. Press that. Now everything is selected. Now we can go to the View menu and go to Range, and then this bottom option, Set Frame Range to Strips. I click that, and there you go. Now it has set it so that this is exactly the range that we're using. The content we have, it's set the frame range to match to that. And if you're curious about what that number actually is, you can see those numbers over here. When you look over here, you can see now we're starting at frame 1 like we always did, but now our ending frame is 175. And that's how you can easily set the scene frame range. Let's go ahead and jump to the start and then press the play button to see how well this plays. Hopefully it plays pretty well. Not bad. Okay, yeah, it looks pretty good. So we've done quite a bit of work now. Let's quickly talk about how you can save your Blender projects. Because of course, there's going to be days when you start working on something and you don't finish it that day. So saving a Blender project is like many other things. You go to File and Save. Easy as that, really. So click that and then you get to choose where you want to save it. I'm gonna stick it over here inside of my folders, and I'll call this demo 5, I suppose. And I'll just type that, I'll press enter, it'll automatically add the .blend extension for Blender projects. I can press enter again to finish the save. And there we go, it is saved. And from here on out, I can continue just clicking File Save as I please, or I can press Control S, the usual keyboard shortcut for saving files anytime I've made a change and I want to save it. Okay, time for the fun stuff. We've done the basic cuts and moves and added the crossfade. What we're going to do now that we have all of this content that pretty much represents what we want to see in the video, now we're going to create a copy of all of that so that we can blow it up as the background that fills in all of the gaps that we currently have. The first step we need to take is to duplicate all of these strips. Well, not all of them, but we'll get to that. We already have all of the strips selected because we had pressed the letter A to select everything. The next thing to do is to duplicate all of these strips, and we can do that by going to the strip menu and going up here to duplicate, which is also Shift D. I'll go ahead and click that, and you'll see what's happening now is, as I mentioned before, we've got red bars happening all over the place because it has created a copy of everything, and it's telling us that it cannot fit these anywhere. Now I'm having a bit of a challenge because what I want to do is move them up. But for some reason, oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Blender is letting me. The fun thing to know about Blender actually is that it'll wrap your cursor across boundaries if needed. So even though it's at the top, then it can go up to the bottom, and that's great. So I can try to shift it all the way up to the top. Because of the fact that we have the snapping feature, I can be sure that now that it's up here and everything shows as yellow, there's no red, and I can see the numbers there, 1 as the first one on the left, and then 175, that matches our scene frame end point there. This is exactly where it needs to be. So I can now left click to confirm my duplication and placement of these strips, and it's done. Now they're all the way up there though, can't see them, so I can press the home key to zoom everything and be able to see all of it. I'm going to also use the mouse wheel a tad just to see a little bit on the sides. So now that we have a copy of everything, let's take the bottom copy because as I mentioned before, the higher channel material will obscure the lower channel material. So it's the stuff on the bottom that we want to use as our background and zoom that up. The easiest way to zoom on everything is to select it all right now and group it together into one unit that we can then manipulate as a single entity. So I'll show you how to do that. We'll start by selecting one of these pairs. And now what we could do is hold on to the Shift key and then start clicking on all of these other things too along the bottom. but there's an easier way. It's called the box select, which you could get to from the select menu. That's the box select over here. But instead of that, I'm going to just press the B key, which is the keyboard shortcut, and just click and draw a box that can touch or totally enclose all of the strips that I want. You let go, and there, all of the strips are now selected. Now, to group them into a single strip, from here we go to the strip menu and say Make Metastrip. And there we go. Now all of that content is now all contained inside this one thing, this Metastrip. Now we can manipulate it as if it was one single thing. There's actually a lot to know about metastrips. I made an entire video just dedicated to metastrips, so I won't talk more about it here. You can watch that video if you're interested. Let's just go ahead and manipulate the metastrip now. And to do that, we're going to go into our preview area here and start to scale it to zoom in on that. The keyboard shortcut to do scaling is the letter S. So I'll press S now, and you can see the mouse cursor has changed. Now as I move the mouse, you can see in the background, behind our foreground content, is the copy that I've zoomed now to, so that it fills completely. You can't see any of that checkerboard pattern anymore. So I will left click to release and confirm my change. And there it is. It was easy as that to do the scaling. Now while we're at it, let's also shift the content down a bit. So to move things around visually here, we can press the letter G. The same G that was to grab strips down here in the sequencer, we can press the G key here to shift where they appear inside of our project. So I'm just dragging it down. And you notice as I'm dragging now, it does snap if you're careful, but it might not. What we can do to control and make sure it is only going up and down is to press the letter Y to lock it to the Y axis. So now it doesn't matter where my mouse goes. I can try to drag all the way to the right or left. It'll only go up and down. Okay, so I'm going to let it snap to this point and then left click to confirm. And that's it. So we created the metastrip, and then we used scaling and we grabbed to adjust position. And now we have this nice zoomed in background underneath the original content. Okay, let's make this a little bit more interesting by applying a blur effect to the background. Now, of course, the background, it already looks kind of blurry, but that's because we're using the 25% proxy. So it is definitely not looking quite the way it should. So as a first step, let's click on to the View tab again inside of our sidebar for the preview and change this back to 100%. Okay, and then I'll click that to hide it. And then to be able to see the background better, this is in our way right now. So I'll show you how to hide a strip from view. What we can do is we can click to select right here. And you'll see that over here it's showing that these strips are now selected. To hide this or mute it, the way to do that is to go up over here back into our properties editor and then click this checkbox that's at the very top when we're in the strip properties section. So click that and it goes away. So it's still visible here, but you can see now it's a gray color to indicate that it is muted. We can easily bring it back by clicking that again, and then it'll come back. There's also a keyboard shortcut for that, which is the letter H to hide something, and then Alt H to bring it back. So we'll do that later. So now we can see very clearly our background right here. Let's go ahead and create that blur effect. And now the first thing we need to do is to select it. So again, we can click to select over here, which would be the same as clicking to select on the strip itself. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is bring that strip down to make space to put in the Gaussian blur effect strip. So I'll go ahead and press the letter G on the keyboard and then just bring my mouse down and I'll left click to place. So now we have plenty of room to work with. Now I'll go to the Add menu and go to Effect Strip, and here it is, Gaussian Blur. So pay attention to the preview as I click to make this selection. Okay, maybe you noticed it, maybe not. It did blur a little bit, and if we turn our attention over to the properties, you can see we're at the Gaussian blur now, and it has these two fields here, size, X and Y. This controls how much of a blur you're getting. So with a value of 9 for the X and Y size, it is a noticeable blur, but let's make it super blurred. To change the value, what we can do is just left click in here and then type in a new value. Let's double it by typing in 18 and pressing enter. Okay, so now that has certainly adjusted the blur in the X direction. We can do the same thing here. I want to take this time to show you that these fields are like little mini calculators. I can type in some math here. I can say 9 times 2 and then press enter, and it'll calculate it as 18 for me. So that's something nice to know. Okay, so turning our attention back over to here, you can see that definitely we have a very blurred background now. So mission accomplished. Before we forget, let's unmute this set of strips here. So click that and then turn that back on, and there it is again. So now we have our nice blurred background and then our nice original content on top of that. And that's blurring for you. Now, before we get into the penultimate step of adding a border, one thing I want to address is the extra copies of the audio strips that we've created. So we know inside of this Metastrip here, we've got all of the original strips, which included the audio portions. We also have the audio here as well. So what we've effectively done by duplicating is doubled the volume of our video. To delete the extra audio strips, we can't just hit X right now, because as you recall, from when we did deleting before, if I press X to delete, it's going to delete both of them, the video as well, and we want to keep that. And this is because of the fact that Blender has connected the strips, which I mentioned earlier. The way to disconnect the strips is by selecting the pair and then going to strip and disconnect strips. Okay, now that they're disconnected, I can click on the specific one I want to get rid of, the audio one, and then press X to delete. We can repeat that action over here and use the keyboard shortcut this time, which is Control-Alt-C to disconnect that. And I'll go ahead and disconnect this one as well. And now I can select these two strips, press X to delete, and there we go. Okay, so now we have the audio at the original volume levels because we only have the original audio strips. Right, so that is done. Now the final thing to do as part of our work here is to create a nice little border effect, something different. So we're going to add a little border here just to separate the original content from the zoomed in background. To do that, we need to add something called a color strip. That's the easiest way to do it. So we could go to the Add menu to add it. It's right here. But I do want to show you this other thing, which is that the Add menu itself has a keyboard shortcut. The shortcut is pressing Shift and A. By doing that, the Add menu pops up wherever your mouse is, and from there we can pick what we want, which is this color strip. After selecting, it's attached to the mouse cursor, so let's go ahead and bring it right to the start because we need it throughout the entire video that we're creating. And the next thing we need to do is extend the length of this strip, or the duration of it, to match to the rest of the content here. So what we can do, you can see as I hover my mouse over on the right side, it changes the cursor. It looks like the edge with an arrow. So at this point, assuming you can see this, then you can click to select and then drag it across all the way until you get to the end, and it should snap in place, and you can let go, and that is done. If you don't see that, you can also change the duration of the strip by going up over to the strip properties and scrolling down until you get to the section on time. And over here, this is where you can click and then set a value. So it's at 175, which matches up to our scene frame range. This is where you can go, you can punch in a number and then press enter, and it'll adjust the strip length there. So now we've got our color strip, and it starts off as black. Let's go ahead and change that now. We can do that by, again, here in the strip properties. So we scroll up to the top where we saw that circle. You can use this bar here. Just click with your left mouse button and drag up to the top to get the full set of colors, and then again left click and pick a nice color that you like. The other option is to click on this color here, which was black to start, and you can also do the same thing over here, or you can use this eyedropper, nice and handy. So if there's any color that exists anywhere inside of the Blender window, then you can use that color. Like for example, maybe I want it to be this gray over here, so I click that, and there we go. Now it's that specific gray color. Actually, I don't like that color. I'm going to change it back to maybe yellow. Sure, that. All right, so we've got our color selected. Now we need to do something about the actual size of it. What we can do now is press the S key while the mouse is inside of this preview area, and then start moving the mouse to change the scaling of the color strip. Now we don't want to scale it like this because now we can see the top and bottom. The idea was really just to shrink it along the horizontal. So we can press the X key on the keyboard to constrain it to the X axis. And now we can control just the size of it, the scaling of it along that. So let's just click about here, and now we have a fairly thick border, and that should work fairly well. But that's just the sides. How are we going to deal with the top and bottom? There isn't actually anything that we can do here with the color strip. Instead, what we should do is focus our attention on these top strips here and change the crop values of those. I'll show you that now. So we'll click to select this first strip, because here we are in the playhead. This is what we're looking at right now. And over under properties, let's scroll down until we see crop. There we go. Click to expand that. Now we have different crop values we can set. Let's start with the top, and then we'll do the bottom. What we can do to set a value, we can type in a number, or we can click on arrows here to change that value. Or an easier thing to do is to click here within the field and then drag left or right, and then that'll adjust the number as well. So if you look at the preview, you can see that 63 is way too much. So maybe let's bring it back to about 30. Oh yeah, okay, 33, let's let go. That doesn't look too bad. It's a bit hard to see, so let's zoom in a bit. Again, we can do that by using the mouse wheel. So I'll use the mouse wheel to zoom in. I can hold down on the middle mouse button to pan up, and look at that. That's good enough. That's good enough. However, that change that we made was just to this first strip. If I click over here in the timeline, you can see it's still at the 0 crop, because we only made a change to the properties of this one strip. This is something that we were trying to avoid when we were creating the background by taking everything and then creating a Metastrip out of it. And we could have done that here. I certainly could have showed it to you that way, but I want to show you something that is very handy to know. Alright, so to use this technique, the first thing we do is make sure we have our strip selected, and let's go over here and set that back to 0. All right, so that change, we're basically undoing that. So we have that strip selected and the crop is reset. Let's select the rest of them. I'll press B for box select them all. And then now I go back over here and I'll type in 33 again, but this time I will hold down on the Alt key and press enter. There we go. By holding down on the Alt key and pressing enter, now it has applied it to every single one of those strips. That's down there, right. And we had to reset to 0 first because weird things can happen if you try to press Alt-Enter, but there was already a value in there. So we know what that process is now. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for the bottom. So I had deselected these strips, so I'm going to have to select them again. Not a big deal. And now I'll go over here, 33, Alt-Enter, and that should be set across all of them. I can pan over here to go to the bottom, and there it is. And if I click around on the timeline, I can see it has been set on all of these things, which is great. Home key to set the zoom back to be able to see everything. And there we go. This is our full content. Nice. So there we go. That was our full content. We've done our edits. We've done the crossfade. We've done the background and the border. Let's, just for kicks, let's see how well it plays inside of Blender's preview. And just to give my computer a fair chance, I'm going to go to View and change it back to the 25%. And then jump to the start, and let's hit the play button to see how well this works. I'm not expecting much, but one of the reasons I wanted to do this, oh, it's not looking too bad. Okay, no, I take it back. It is bad. That was terrible. It just jumped to this whole section. But the reason I wanted to do that, not to have a knock against Blender, but to prove to you that it doesn't matter how bad the preview is inside of Blender as you're working. It might not be great, especially if you have an older computer like mine, but it doesn't impact how well the final exported video will be. And that's what we're going to do right now. We have done all of our work. Let's go ahead and save before we do anything else. I'll just press Ctrl S to save. You know that changes have been made because there's a little asterisk that shows up there when you have unsaved changes. So Ctrl S, there we go, we've saved the file. Let's export our work into a video file that we can then do whatever we want with. The first thing, and really the only thing we need to do before we render out, before we create our final product, is to give it a file name. So to do that, it's back in the Properties editor, but this time we go over to this icon that looks like a printer. That's the Output Properties. We click on that. And actually it's right over here, but let me jump up to the top first to show you some other things. Right at the top here, this is where you can establish the resolution of your project. I was always going to create something that's 1920 by 1080, so I didn't bother coming here beforehand. And this is where the frame rate is. But this is where you would go if you wanted to change that. Now, we can also see that there's frame range information here, but we're going right down over here to Output. And one way of doing it is to click on this icon here and then pick the location where you want it to go. In my case, I want to put it in that same folder where I've been working, which is in here. So that's where I want it to be. And down over here, this is where I type in the file name that I want to use for the created output. I'm going to call this output.mp4, and that's it. I'll press enter once and then again to accept. So there we go, the window disappeared, and now this is the full file path of the output that we're going to create. If I keep scrolling down, you can see it's already set up to export as a video. That's pretty much it. There are different options we can go into within the encoding section if we wanted to, but the settings that it has by default is good enough for most purposes, I would say. It's definitely good enough for uploading to YouTube, for example. So we've got that set. Let's go ahead and export our video. To do that, we go up to the render menu and choose render animation. And now we sit back and wait. So what it's doing right now, it popped up a new window, Blender render window, and it is now outputting frame by frame to our output video file. You can see over here the frame that it's currently on. If you remember, we have a total of 175 frames to output, so this is going to take some time. I'm going to kind of speed this up inside of my video processing, and we'll reconnect when it's done. I'll show you how to get rid of this in case you don't want to see it. In particular, I don't like it because I feel like it adds extra processing to my computer, and it certainly doesn't need extra processing. So I'll show you how to get rid of that as part of the bonus options. Once this is done, we're going to look at the rendered product. Okay, so back in a few. Okay, welcome back. It has completed. So we can go ahead and close this window. And let's now take a look at the video that was generated. And here it is. Let's play this file. So it played very quickly. It took a long time to output, but it played quickly, and as you saw, no delays, no chugging, no nothing. It played exactly as it looks like when we scrub through it. So preview sometimes works well, sometimes doesn't, but the exported video will look nice and clean and smooth. So there you have it. That was the full content for today, besides the bonus. So I hope you liked that. If you did, please do give this video a like and consider subscribing so you can see more content whenever it comes. And that's it for what we set out to talk about. Stick around for bonus if you want. Hello, welcome to the bonus section. If you're here, it's because you liked what you saw. So let's show you more things that hopefully you'll continue to like. The first thing is to get rid of that window that pops up when you render. Maybe you like that, but if you don't, like me, this is how you can make sure that it doesn't show up again. You go to your edit menu and go to preferences, and from there you should be at interface. If not, click that, and then go down to temporary editors, click to expand that, and then this option here, render in, change that from new window to keep user interface. So that's the first bonus item for you. While we're here in the preferences, let's talk about left mouse button versus right mouse button for selections. If you picked one and you want to try using the other one instead, here's how you can change that. So here in the preferences window, go down to key map and then change this first option here. So select with mouse button, it's either left or right. Another change you can make while we're here is changing the behavior of connecting strips together, the video and audio portions of a movie file when you import it. If you don't like them being connected by default, you can change it here by going over to editing and then click to expand on video sequencer and then uncheck this option, connect movie strips by default. By unchecking this, then when you bring new video files into Blender, it'll add those two strips, the video and audio, but then they will not be connected, so you can act on them independently. And it's not so bad, really. Let me show you. So I'll uncheck this, and I'll go back to my Blender window. And now let's just come over to this point over here, and I'll bring in this other video right over here. Okay, so you can see now that they are separate strips. They're not linked in any way, so I can act on them independently. Now, you might be thinking this is a disadvantage, so as an example, if I were to select them both, I'll use the Shift key to do that. So I have them both selected. I'll go over here and I'll apply a cut with the letter K, a split rather. You might be thinking, oh, it's really hard to select these now because you select it and then you have to hold down on Shift to select the other one. It's actually not, because there are other ways you can do selections. Instead of just clicking on something to select, if you hold down on the Control key, then Blender will select that strip plus any other strips and other channels that have the exact same start and end frames. So I'll hold down on Control and click on this, and these two will get selected. And then likewise, if I click over here, then these two get selected. This ability to select strips based off of start and stop using Control is pretty handy. It means that you can turn off that feature if you didn't like it, and you're not really missing out too much on that convenience. So while we're talking about convenience, the Add menu, I showed you before with the color strip that you can bring up the Add menu just by holding down on Shift and pressing A. But you can also add your movie content here too. If I click on this, this whole window pops up and I can select that video again right from here. Just double click here, and now, like with the color strip, I can click to place it somewhere. What that means is, because you can easily add content using the Add menu, whether you use the Add menu up here or just press Shift A to bring it up, that means you don't really need this file browser editor over here. And the reason I bring this up is because I've already shown you before that you can change the size of these different areas. You can do it vertically, or you can do it horizontally. But you can do even more beyond just that. If you wanted to, you can squeeze this thing down to practically nothing. So it's still there and accessible if you want, but not totally taking up a lot of space. If you don't want it at all, instead of left clicking along here to resize, you can right click and then choose this option, join left or join right. You can tell by the icon what's going to happen. If I say join left, then what's on the right side right now will join into the left side and take over completely. Check this out. And there. Now that area is completely gone. So if you didn't want to ever use the file browser, you don't have to, and you can take that space back and use it however you see fit. Let's say you did that by accident. There isn't an undo for this. If I try to go to undo, it'll probably undo something about here, like maybe adding that video. It won't undo the action of changing your workspace layout. But don't worry about it. You can get it back if you want to. And the way to get something back is, first you need to recreate a space there, and then you need to select whatever it was that was there to begin with. To add that area again, because all of these things, all of these different sections that we've been talking about, these are all just different areas. They're containers for the different components of Blender that you can use. So to recreate an area, you go into the top left corner until the mouse cursor changes into something that looks like a crosshair, and then left click and then start dragging. And you'll see it changes to look like this. And when I let go, now I have two areas again. However, what's inside of those two areas, they're copies of each other. They're both copies. They're both this preview view of our video sequence editor. So the other thing I haven't mentioned, which is very important to know, is that you can change what is in each of these spaces. During the tutorial, I was hovering over these so you could see the name of the editor in each of these spots. So here we have the video, it's actually the video sequence editor. So this preview is actually the same kind of editor as the sequencer down here. And if I can change it to look exactly like that by clicking on preview and then saying sequencer. So now it's it is basically that, just it's too small, this area, to be able to see everything. Let's switch that back to preview. So within each of these areas, everything is an editor, and you can change what you want. So if I wanted to turn this back to the file browser, I click on this. So instead of that, I go and find file browser. It's over here. And it looks a bit different. The view is slightly different. We can try to adjust it to make it look more like what it was before. I think it was along the lines of this. And then there you go. You have your file browser back. So again, you may need to tweak it a little bit to get it back exactly the way it was before. But now you know. For me, like, I typically don't use the file browser because you don't need it. I often change this to be the graph editor, because the graph editor comes in handy and is quite essential when you start doing animations. Moving on, let's talk a little bit more about selections. Over here, when we were preparing to create the Metastrip, I had shown you that pressing the letter A will select everything. Another good thing to know is if you press A twice, then it'll deselect everything. So A. There, now everything is deselected. Other good things to know is being able to select everything inside of a particular channel. So let's say, for example, this one here, if I were to cut it at multiple points, so cut, and cut. So now I have 5 different segments. I can easily select all of the different strips within this specific channel, channel number 4, by going to Select, Channel, both sides. So now there we go. Now everything is selected. If I wanted to, I could delete them all in one shot by pressing X. So something as easy as that. Other things to note while we're talking about channels is I did show you before how you can hide a specific strip by clicking to select that strip and then going over to the strip properties, and at the top you can hide or mute it by clicking that checkbox, and then that gets hidden. Oh, all of this stuff is in the way. Let me get rid of that first to prove my point. There we go. So now that's hidden. I think I mentioned, so it's the letter H to hide anything. You can't just keep pressing it again to unhide. To unhide, you can press Alt H, and that brings it back. And that's faster than trying to go back up here every single time you want to unhide something. But going back to channels, if you had multiple strips on the channel and you just want to hide all of them all at once, if you want to apply it to the entire channel, just click this checkbox next to the channel. Now everything along that channel will be hidden or muted until you check it back on. The other thing to note is that there's another option right here, another button you can click on that will lock it. So it prevents you from accidentally doing anything to any of the strips on this channel. So now I can select things, but I can't, for example, grab it. Grabbing doesn't work. So I can't move things around within the sequencer. I can still go and change properties. So if I wanted to, I could change the scale of this, maybe make that like 1. So it's doable. Like adjusting properties can be done, but not moving them around within the sequencer. Another thing is the hotkeys. So I mentioned at one point you can press the letter N to pop the sidebar in and out, and then the sidebar itself is a little bit extra. You can click to expand to see different things, but the letter N can show and hide that in its entirety. All the stuff on the left hand side, this is all part of the tools, which you can toggle on and off by pressing the T. So that can show and hide it over there. These keys you can also press over here in the regular sequencer view. So pressing the letter N here expands this out, so you can see things like, for example, information about proxies, like what proxies are set for it right now. If you've used Blender before, you might have been surprised this whole time that the properties don't exist here anymore. The properties are now over here for all of your strips. In addition, the modifiers are not here either. The modifiers are also moved up to properties under here. So this is where you would go if you wanted to, for example, add a mask modifier to any of your strips. Okay, so that's something to know. Some more keyboard shortcuts to know are the page up and page down. You can use them to jump around on your timeline here, to jump to different points, like the start and end frames of the different strips that you have. So you can see as I'm going around here that it jumps right away to these points here. While we're talking about keyboard shortcuts, it is handy to hover your mouse over things to be able to spot more. Like for example, this button here that you can click on to jump to the very beginning of your scene. If you hover over it, you'll see that it shows you that the shortcut is Shift left arrow. Right? So if I come back over here and I press Shift left arrow, it takes me back. So you can hover over a lot of these different buttons and see if there are shortcuts assigned to them that you can make use of. Okay, and the last thing I want to show you in this bonus section is how you can export using the H.265 codec, which compresses a lot better. I've seen file savings of more than 50%. So to do that, you go back over to the output properties, and if we go down to output, make sure that this encoding section is expanded out. You scroll down to where it says video, and you change this option from H.264 to H.265/HEVC. By doing that, it will use this newer codec, and you will get significant file savings there. I'm assuming it'll upload fine to YouTube. I haven't actually tried yet. But there you go. Those are the options. Okay, so that's it for all the content. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, if you did, please do give this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing and ringing the bell to get notifications when new videos are posted. Thanks and have a nice day.